close your eyes for a second. We're going to start this off by doing a quick little exercise. Now, this exercise can apply to a lot of different games if you want it to, but we mainly do Mario Kart on this channel, so that's the example I'm going to go with. I want you to think about the next game in the series, though. I want you to think about the character that you most want to be added to that game. This can be a returning character, a fan favorite, or even a lesser known one that you just happen to like a lot. It doesn't have to be a character from a related game or even a video game character at all. Whoever you would want to add, just picture them in your head. Now, imagine this hypothetical scenario. The developers themselves have mostly decided on the character roster already, but they randomly come to you for guidance. They've decided that the voice of the fan should matter, and you were the lucky fan selected to make the call. The last character decision is officially in your hands, and luckily for you, you thought about this already, and you tell them that. They smile and hand you a sheet of paper. Now, go ahead and open your eyes. Which choice are you going to make? Option A or option B? It's entirely up to you. Isn't that just great? Often we find this to be our reality. Maybe someone has given you a choice, but you can't help but feel that a better one's out there hidden away. It's not that you refuse their question, you just refuse the answers. But sometimes this frustrates the very asker. Perhaps they feel like giving you a choice might be the kind thing to do, but could it be possible that they don't want to hear your true opinion? Well, sometimes it's not that deep. Like with YouTube polls. Often I scroll by them on my feed and question what I'm even looking at, like with this one. I mean, how are we not including Vampire Waluigi here? I mean, it's a Halloween party, right? They even included Vampire Pauline, which as far as I know, is not canon, and all I can say is that our boy needs some justice. Now, YouTube polls have got to be one of my favorite new creator features, don't get me wrong. Not only does it offer a low-effort way for people to engage with my channel, but it actually serves as a unique way to get into the mind of your audience. These polls, of course, are just for fun and are rather inconsequential for the most part. They can give me a quick perspective of my viewers, but it leaves me with a question. Are they actually reflective of the real truth? Well, I already asked the big question a few weeks ago, and it resulted in an incredibly tight race where baby Rosalina barely squeaked out the win. I have no reason to doubt the results of this poll, but the framing here is obviously different. In this poll, you're just choosing your preference. Earlier, you were perhaps questioning why these two were your only options. And why shouldn't you? We are complex and have opinions on literally everything. Every time a new game comes out, we put it under the microscope, or come up with rankings of its contents, or maybe even rank it amongst the series it's in. And why is this content interesting to so many? Well, we're all super different, and we like seeing if others have similar takes to us, and because we often disagree with each other, it's all the more special when you find someone that shares your thoughts. This is exactly why I think we do our polls incorrectly, though. By default, we use a plurality voting system known as first past the post, where we get to vote on one candidate that we want to win. Often though, this setup doesn't let us express our true, nuanced beliefs. How do we actually fix this though? Well, it's a surprisingly layered topic, but I went out searching for a way to explain the rather difficult answers. To start, I needed some polls with more than two options, and thus the process of sending out some intentionally terrible polls began. Not necessarily because I wanted to troll all of you who responded, but because I knew how these innocent-looking opinion polls could make my case today. The first one wasn't so bad. I mean, it was just another simple character question, this time with more popular characters and 4 options. It looks like Luigi really ran away with this one, but one comment on this poll stuck out to me. It was a dispute about second place. How could a character like Waluigi be so close to Mario, who is obviously more popular? Well, this is where the cracks start to show for the bigger polls. Mario and Waluigi couldn't be more opposite. Mario is a character with a broad appeal after all, and Waluigi's more polarizing. The thing is, polarizing can work in a setting like this. Many Waluigi fans are simply diehards. They might be likely to have him number 1 more often than number 2. And in a poll like this where you can only select one character, that matters. It would be unfair to come away from this poll saying Mario is the second favorite amongst the group of voters here, because in reality we have no idea if the Luigi voters prefer Mario or Waluigi, or if the Wario voters do either for that matter. And when you realize this, you start to question if the poll is telling you much of anything at all. This is not a problem when there's only 2 options, but there's some other important comments to look at as well. This one just says Yoshi, so it seems that I have too many options, yet simultaneously not enough. Here's a poll I did on the Mario Kart Tour tracks. There's 7 of them total, but since image polls only give 4 options, I had to get crafty to technically include every other option this time. But yet, there's an obvious flaw with the system. How many people are actually going to vote for other? I did try to choose some of the really popular ones to appear separately, and for that reason alone, it's not the most far-fetched idea in the world that other could make up just 10% of the vote. But I don't think this is the case. The comments indicated that many people are big fans of Squeaky Clean Sprint, but it is also probably just less exciting to vote for a big question mark block. The thing about this poll was that it was never about the tracks. It's obviously a subpar representation of the voter base's feelings on the question. The purpose of it, from my perspective, was to see how many people would actually vote for Other, and compare it to this next poll featuring some of the MK8 tracks. This is the same type of question as before with an Other option. The thing is, Other represents significantly more courses for this poll. It represented just 4 in the last one we looked at, but here it technically represents 22 entire courses. For this reason, it feels like a reasonable expectation to expect that the amount of people voting Other is going to be way higher in this poll, and yet, it sat at 10% in both of the surveys. What I think happened here is everyone saw the other 3 courses and had an opinion of which of the 3 they wanted to see win the most. Maybe one of these tracks was someone's second favorite course, or maybe some people just find a particular one to be overrated. Maybe somebody participating likes Rainbow Road the most, but vastly preferred Cloudtop Cruise to the other 2 options. That person would very possibly vote for Cloudtop Cruise as their favorite track, just because they might feel that they would have a better chance of influencing the winner that way, even if technically the answer would be untruthful. This is what I would call strategic voting. It might just be the downfall of society too, and why we can't have nice things. Now, I'm not claiming that everyone taking part in the poll voted strategically. Many people really like Mount Wario and aren't lying when they say it's their favorite track. But I am confident that strategic voting took place in some form because I feel confident saying that 90% of people definitely don't have the same 3 favorite tracks out of a group of 25 options. Well, at least if the focus group isn't made up of lounge players. Strategic voting is not limited to weird polls like this one though. It's everywhere. Take this Twitter poll I did well over a year ago asking everyone which DS track was their favorite addition to the booster pass. For those not in the know, there are 4 options that fit that criteria to begin with, so nobody was being left out of the poll. Nobody's favorite option was being relegated to other status here. If a course won the poll, it would get to take full glory. So does this fix the issue? Well, I don't get to participate in my own Twitter polls, but for those of you who follow the channel, you likely know which track I would pick here. Except, you don't actually. Now, if I had to rank these tracks 1 to 4, I'd do it this way. If I was the type of person who would grade all these DLC courses and make a recent video about it that you should totally watch when this video ends, I'd probably grade them this way, with all personal biases attached. The problem here is I knew my audience at the time. They loved Shroom Ridge and Peach Gardens, and those were the only 2 options that had a reasonable chance of winning. Everyone just hated my beloved pinball course back then. So my selection, had I had one, would have been Shroom Ridge. Even if it's not exactly my favorite, it is one of my top 5 courses in the game, and I would have rather seen it win the poll than one I just see as alright. But I would have been lying to do this. I would be making the results less accurate and less reflective of the actual opinions of the voters. And when that happens, we simply are missing the point of voting to begin with. So going back to the original question of the day, is this actually the most honest question I've shown so far? The selection is literally one or the other, or a head-to-head, so there isn't really incentive to think about this strategically at all, or lie, since the only way you can lie would be by choosing the option you want to win the least. I find the answer to still be no. A few years ago, IGN hosted a tournament bracket for the greatest video game characters of all time. The winner was pretty obviously Mario. Brackets are typically done with solely head-to-head matchups, so you would think that the outcome is legitimate and not infected with tactical selections. The thing is, Mario couldn't even win my poll from earlier. The truth of the matter is brand recognition just matters in these types of polls. Mario is popular worldwide, but he is also just a default setting. He's bland and not very complex. He's just the hero. Comparatively, Luigi has more character. He is flawed, but that makes him relatable, and he has an established personality of being fearful yet still wanting to be brave. He is the more meaningful character, I would argue, whereas Mario kind of just feels like a mascot. But Luigi fans likely voted for Mario all throughout that bracket. He is representative of the video games that they likely love, and actually has the credibility to win in a bracket full of gaming icons. In a one-off Mario vs Luigi poll, I feel like Luigi would always have a shot at winning. But when there are greater stakes, it feels doubtful that he ever would. Ideally, you just want a system where everyone is always incentivized to vote their conscience. But even in a one-on-one setting with no other challengers, I feel like this might not always be the case. So the search continues. Is there a method out there that removes the incentive to be strategic rather than honest? Approval voting is a system where you mark approve or disapprove for every option, and the most approved candidate is deemed the winner. This system is better if you want to express some level of support for multiple options, and this system offers a way to make it harder for your disliked candidate to win as well. But the downside is that there is no way to express who your true favorite is unless you fill your ballot out no differently than you would for first past the post, which again is the main system that we use for YouTube, US elections, you name it. With approval voting, the cutoff line on who an acceptable winner is not always clear. I much prefer score-based voting, also known as range voting, for this reason. This allows everyone to give a star rating to a candidate like it's a Yelp review, and whoever gets the highest total score wins. That being said, if you clearly have a favorite choice or least favorite choice, you can use this rating system to try to bury an option or all of the option's opponents, at the expense of those who are more honest. This is not an ideal situation because if you strategically vote a bunch of stuff as either a 0 or a 5, you are still not expressing any differences between all those options, even if in reality you do have varying opinions about them. This is why ranked choice voting has become an attractive alternative that more and more people have brought attention to in recent years. I'm sure many of you have heard about it but don't really understand how it works, so I'm going to explain it in simple terms. Hypothetically speaking, ranked choice voting solves the score voting problem we discussed by giving you an actual incentive to rank your options, because even if you really like one option above all, you will be giving it maximum support already by ranking it first. So once all the ballots get filled out and sent in, you watch multiple rounds play out. At the end of the first round, whichever candidates have either 0 or the smallest amount of non-zero first place votes get eliminated. For all the people whose first option gets eliminated, their vote will now be transferred over to the candidate that they ranked next highest. This process continues until one candidate has a majority. The premise of this is great because voters aren't punished by voting for a candidate unlikely to win. This system allows people to vote their conscience without it automatically feeling like a wasted vote, and this should limit strategic voting a bit. So this is great, right?
Well, initially I thought so, because it was clear from the jump that ranked choice voting was better than a plurality system like first past the post, but it still has some flaws of its own. How it's flawed, though, is not immediately obvious.
So the other day, I did a redo of many of my YouTube polls from the beginning of this video. This time, I decided to do them right and with more expressive methods. I made an announcement in my Discord server and on the community tab here that this time, I wanted people to rank the options instead of just picking one. Did it change anything? Well, yes actually. But it's also worth noting that these opinions were taken from a smaller sample size and slightly different demographic. I'd say that the proportion of competitive players is a little bit higher in this sample than the last one, but enough yapping, let's get into the actual results. Squeaky Clean Sprint came out on top of the Tour Tracks poll. It also had the most amount of first place votes from the jump, so it would have won under first past the post as well. This is notable because it shows that 10% of people voting other on the last poll was almost certainly a farce and not representative of reality. The green boxes you see represent elimination transfers. Mary Mountain had the smallest amount of non-zero first place votes with 1, and you can see that upon elimination, the person who voted it best had their vote transferred to their second option, which was also Squeaky Clean Sprint. Sometimes a ballot can even undergo multiple transfers. Ninja Hideaway was the other finalist, though I'm not sure I would say this necessarily means it's the second place course. Even though it had the second most first place votes initially, had the vote taken place 18 months ago, before Squeaky Clean Sprint even launched, it would still finish second. And this is because most of the Squeaky Clean fans had Yoshi's Island as their second option, but we never saw those second options influence the results as Squeaky Clean Sprint won. It can be likely under ranked choice voting that a finalist is not even as popular as the quote, third place track, and this can be seen in not just my original poll, but in the ranking averages too. The thing about ranked choice voting is that it does not always seem to consider if there's a potential compromise to be made that might better describe the voters' collective will. This system only looks at the second options if their main candidate flops, without asking if the eventual winner's voters would have also been completely fine with their second option if it was more popular across the board. Instead, a polarizing candidate can still very much win here, even if a third of the group really doesn't like it that much. In Ninja Hideaway's case, it being a more polarizing choice helped it get to the final round, but its support wavered when facing a head-to-head matchup against a more well-rounded opponent. Ninja Hideaway has a lot of fans, but not an overwhelming amount. Sometimes though, the more polarizing option does run the table, and this is seen when looking at the MK8 results. Here, Mount Wario came out on top, and would have won the plurality vote as well, with the most amount of people ranking it first initially. That said, unlike Squeaky Clean Sprint, I'm not sure if it was actually the most popular course among this set of voters. Both Sunshine Airport and Bowser's Castle had lower average rankings, but less first place votes. Bowser's Castle eventually caught up by the final round, but Cloudtop Cruise's fans preferring Mount Wario ultimately sealed the deal. Speaking of which, Cloudtop was surprisingly a bit polarizing itself. It averaged an entire rank worse than Sunshine Airport, yet made it to a further round. Surprisingly, Sunshine Airport, despite having the best average rank amongst the group, did not make it to the final three. And some might see this as a problem, but I do think it makes some sense. Everyone, including both casual and competitive players, seem to have a generally favorable view of Sunshine Airport. It's rarely ever hated, but it's also not frequently someone's very top option. A good rank is one thing, but here's the other thing about rank choice. A good rank doesn't always mean the same thing. To some people, they might see their second choice as a significant drop-off from their favorite, while others might see it as a practically interchangeable thing. So was the system right to not have Sunshine Airport in the finals despite having the best average ranking? Well, maybe it was. The problem in my mind is that we don't really know what the voters actually think about it. We just know where they ranked it. Finally, we get to the character poll where the results were drastically different from YouTube. Now I know the Luigi fan club who effectively made him run away with my YouTube poll might be outraged by this, but again, this is not me saying the results of that poll were invalid. This is merely just a demonstration of a different group of people. And the demonstration here is that ranked choice is a deeply flawed system. While Luigi gets his justice from being left out of the Halloween Party poll, his diehard fans seem to have done him a solid here actually, as he comes out on top of Luigi and Wario despite the worst average rank. But is this actually justice? Well, this is a really interesting setup. While Luigi was able to defeat Luigi in the final round after Luigi defeated Wario in a tiebreaker. This tiebreaker was just surveying all 34 responders on who they preferred, and Luigi won that 18-16. But my big question is the following. Does Waluigi match up well against Wario? The answer is surprisingly no, and because it is no, I can demonstrate how to break this system in half. So consider my friend Chiaki's ballot. Chiaki has Mario first, Luigi second, Wario third, and Waluigi fourth. Matter of fact, he has some point values showing that he really isn't a fan of Waluigi compared to the other three. Now, let's consider a world where he swapped Mario and Wario. Now when Mario is eliminated, his vote isn't transferred to Luigi, it stays with Wario. And what this does is make it so Luigi and Wario never tie anymore, so Luigi gets eliminated next instead of Wario. Luigi's first place voters then are split, and they favored Wario 7-3 over Waluigi, and this pushes Wario to actually be the overall winner. It turns out Luigi's fans might hate Waluigi as much as he does. I guess it's a true rivalry. But the important thing to note is that had Chiaki flipped these characters, he'd be lying. But it would also make Wario win instead of his least favorite character if he did that. So making the swap benefits him, and what it means is that voting his favorite first actually gave him a worse outcome. And the fact that this is possible can once again incentivize strategic voting in the system. There's even more to this though. Consider the second to last vote here. Luigi first, Waluigi second, Mario third, Wario fourth. As we know, Waluigi won in this timeline already, but let's say at the last second, this voter changed their mind and placed Waluigi first instead of Luigi, hypothetically giving Waluigi more support than he already had. Well, it turns out that this would actually cost Waluigi the win, since once again this would cause Luigi to be eliminated before Wario. In this instance, it shows that it is technically possible to lose solely because you got more support, and this should never happen in any fair vote.
Realizing this was kind of devastating to me. I mean, there's obviously massive perks to ranked choice voting over plurality voting, and I think it even had the potential to make election season a little less toxic and less off-putting to everybody. And it's really a shame because the voting process is one of the most important things we do in actuality. And it should be open to everybody.
Ranked choice voting would allow for people to vote third party if that's what people truly wanted to do, without a bunch of people screaming in their ear that it's a wasted vote. Perhaps the mainstream candidates imposed upon us every 4 years would have to be more respectful to their political rivals and focused on actual issues, if being particularly nasty would result in making alternative third parties more appealing. In a world where people aren't scared of wasting their vote, who knows what could happen over time. But even if ranked choice voting allows more expressive ballots than first past the post, how do we justify the flaws that come with them? Well, we don't, in my opinion. We instead go with a system that's actually better. So let's talk about star voting. Nobody seems to know what star voting is, but the STAR is an acronym and it stands for Score Then Automatic Runoff. It's a two-phase system that starts with a scoring phase that's identical to the score voting system we talked about earlier. This is actually why Chiaki's post earlier had point values. I asked for them for a reason. So why does the scoring system work all of a sudden? Well, it's because of the second phase, the automatic runoff. Pretty much the two options with the best overall scores advance to a final round. In that final round, every voter's opinion is considered. If you scored option A higher than option B, option A gets a vote and vice versa. Notably, if you scored both options the same, it's assumed that you have no preference. And this right here is the key that makes it all work. If you tried to cheat the system by giving your favorite candidate a 5 and everybody else a 0, it's assumed that you only have one preference. If your favorite candidate doesn't make the runoff, you essentially have no vote because you graded everyone else equally. One might say that this is harsh, but the truth of the matter is that this would be self-inflicted. If your second favorite candidate is up against your least favorite candidate after doing this, you could have given your second favorite candidate support had you scored them a little higher. If you truly liked only one candidate though, scoring everyone else as a 0 isn't strategic voting, it's just being honest. People can still attempt to vote strategically in this system, but it's not really a big deal because the odds of it succeeding are roughly equivalent to the odds of it backfiring. You're better off just voting honestly at that point. And comparatively, it is much stronger in this regard than ranked choice voting and especially first past the post. So I was curious about this, and for the polls above I compiled the results under the star voting system too. Squeaky Clean Sprint was still the most popular tour track, but notably, Yoshi's Island made the runoff this time. It likely did better than Ninja Hideaway because it had less negative votes, and while many people might say that first place votes need to matter, I would say that they still do. The top two scoring averages are bound to have a lot of first place votes making them up, and as a finalist you're going to have to come out on top more often than not against another popular candidate. Believe it or not though, if you actually tally up the number of 5s, you'll notice that Yoshi's Island actually has more than Ninja Hideaway despite the fact that it had one less than the first place votes. In actuality, the ranked choices were perhaps a little deceiving. A lot of first place votes went to Ninja Hideaway, but like I alluded to earlier, some of the first place votes were probably interchangeable with second options, and that's not something that ranked choice voting is able to decipher. The 8U track runoff ended up being a face-off between Sunshine Airport and Bowser's Castle, and this was a better matchup for Bowser's Castle. It turns out a lot of Sunshine Airport enjoyers gave it a 5 despite it not being their absolute favorite, meaning it was probably closer to being their favorite than the earlier rankings indicated. The track also had literally no 0 or 1 scores attached to it, which goes a long way in helping the total score. Bowser's Castle was similar as it also had hardly any 0s or 1s. It had slightly more 5s, but one vote giving it a 0 seemed to balance it out. This voter also gave Sunshine Airport a 5, and I think that this person's likely what kept Bowser's Castle from being the top scoring course. That said, once we get to the final two options, we essentially use the first past the post method again. It is an effective tool for democracy when there's strictly 2 candidates. The problem with it is just getting the right candidates, and that's what the scoring phase does for us here. The Bowser's Castle 0 was an outlier vote, and it did have an impact in the scoring phase, but not enough to prevent the track from getting to the runoff. So overall, Bowser's Castle had more people supporting it over Sunshine Airport, so it is crowned our winner here. Again, I'm not saying that this is the best overall 8U track, I'm just saying that's probably the most reflective of these 29 voters' opinions. The character poll was incredibly tight, outside of Mario at least, and instinctively one might fear that we could tinker with some numbers here to manipulate the outcome again, but that's not really the case this time. Giving your favorite candidate the maximum score will never punish the candidate under star voting. It will only boost their score, which strictly increases their chances of getting into the runoff phase and even winning that runoff phase. In Chiaki's case, he could have prevented Waluigi from winning again had he voted higher for Wario, but the key difference here is that if he did that, he wouldn't have been punished for giving Mario, his favorite character, a 5 or the best score. There was no incentive to strategically vote against his favorite candidate like with the ranked choice system. He could have just given them both a 5 if he wanted to, but that also would have come at the risk of costing Luigi, his second favorite candidate, a chance of winning as well. As mentioned, strategic voting can often backfire. Really, the only way strategic voting makes sense is if a candidate you want to support obviously has no chance of winning. And that may appear to be Mario here, but it's also important to understand that this is a very after-the-fact kind of criticism that can be applied unfairly to ranked choice as well. The truth is, many people wouldn't have even predicted this, and it's harder to predict the outcomes of systems that are more complex than plurality voting to begin with. It's also harder to gerrymander what second and third options as well as scores might be in an area, but that's a whole new can of worms that can be addressed another day. For now, I just want to say that I think the star voting system is a winner, and any future videos I do with polls involved will try to use this method despite its complexity. So what exactly is my conclusion to all of this? Well, it's that we can do better. That we can be more expressive both as individuals and collectively, and be better represented. But this starts with being informed about the solutions and even caring about them. Now this has been a video I've wanted to make for a very long time because I wanted to do anything in my power to start that very process. I spent years at this point educating myself and thinking about how exactly to word this all because I'm a YouTuber that makes Mario Kart videos. That's what my viewers expect from me, and I wouldn't have it any other way. I understand that voting systems are kind of a discussion that is intertwined to politics, and believe me, I'm not interested in becoming a political commentator. I just want to make the videos about the silly little things that matter to me, even if in the grand scheme of the world, they might be insignificant. But unfortunately, some things in the world get in the way of that at times. Even if you aren't really interested in politics, politics are unfortunately interested in you. The timing of this video was no coincidence. I've ran out of justification to delay it because now more than ever is when the message might resonate the most. First off, happy election day to my fellow Americans. But secondly, I really hope that you take something away from this. The purpose of voting is to gain an understanding of what the people want. Nothing more, nothing less. But with a tool so powerful comes a desire for bad faith actors to control it. Their goal is to make the results less representative and the process more hateful. And their goal is to make us disillusioned with it all. And they are currently winning that fight. They're winning it because this is simply something nobody cares enough to talk about. The thing is, we shouldn't be letting them win. It's not like poll manipulation is just a real world issue either. Even back in the ancient days of this online Mario Kart community, there were memes about this exact kind of subject, and unironically, the backlash has actually caused changes to happen over the years. And this is why I felt this topic was necessary to do a video about. I simply just wanted to do my part to help inspire the change I want to see, instead of just thinking about it all as I usually would do otherwise. Part of why I keep these thoughts to myself is because I feel like people don't actually care. But the truth is, this is to the detriment of everyone. It is nobody's responsibility to fix this on their own. I realize I can't fix it, but there's no good in withholding any thoughts that could help make some kind of difference. I know if this video didn't pop up in your feed, maybe you would have gone about your day not really caring about this otherwise, but I think we all do need to care. This impacts all of us, nor is it really a controversial or even political issue in my opinion. I'm not asking for anybody to take a side really, I'm just asking everybody to acknowledge the obvious. That our voting system should actually work. And this is why I encourage you to look up more about star voting, ask me some questions, or even challenge me on the math, or give some takes on other systems that you think are better. These conversations matter, and I'll throw a few links in the description to get you started if you're interested in that. It's my hope that I can even inspire some of you to be advocates for this yourselves, and if I can't reach everyone in the world, maybe some of those who watch today can. Some of the arguments I see against voting reform say that it's too complicated, or that it might make people have to research the candidates more. And to that, I say, good? I mean, when you choose a car or a house, or even what college you want to attend, I'm sure you don't look at only the first two options presented to you. So why shouldn't some basic research apply here? Should we really be proud of our country if we think about our choices when staring at a menu more than our choices for the most important office in the land? And look, I really don't want to be dismissive, but if you can't figure out how to score some people on a 0 to 5 scale, I really don't know what to tell you. This is really a nonpartisan issue. None of the polls today were politically motivated, and I use Mario Kart prompts for many different reasons, and that's one of them. My area of expertise is not in political science, it's in math, and this is really what the issue is about at the end of the day. I'm just tired of hearing the phrase lesser of two evils. If what's popular is not the collective favorite, or even really liked for that matter, the system's broken, and it's not being fixed until the solution is common knowledge. So happy voting everyone, and please do vote if you can. Maybe it does feel pointless today, but your voice does matter. Just remember, the fight's not over next week. The future can be better, but it all starts with today.